Hello, everybody. This is Joe Firestone again for Empowering Democracy. This is October 31st at 1:31 p.m. The topic for this stream is Bolsonaro yet to concede. So, Lula da Silva won yesterday, of course. And hi, Steve Day. Nice to see you here. Thank you for buying me a cup of coffee the other day. That was very nice and much appreciated. Uh, so, here's another Brazil story. I am groping here for the share buttons. There's a picture of Lula lifting his hand in victory, surrounded by happy celebrants, supporters. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva speaks after being elected president of Brazil on October 30th, 2022. The headline is Bolsonaro yet to concede as progressives worldwide celebrate Lula's win. It's by Jake Johnson, October 31st, 2022. It's Common Dreams. Progressives celebrated leftists Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's victory Sunday in Brazil's presidential election as a major win for the climate, workers, and democracy itself, all of which were threatened by the policies and actions of far-right incumbent Jair Bolsonaro, who has yet to concede the race. Quote, 6 years ago, the coup against Dilma Rousseff ushered in a dark period in Latin America's largest country. But the M25, a pan-European pro-democracy movement, said in a statement on Monday. By the way, the M25 is the organization founded by Yanis Varoufakis. Anyway, they said in a statement on Monday, referring to the 2016 ouster of Lula's presidential successor, an ally, but that, by the way, was Dilma Rousseff. Quote, a darkness that deepened with the political imprisonment of Lula and culminated with the election of Jair Bolsonaro and the disastrous and criminal acts perpetrated by him during his presidency, unquote. Quote again, now Brazilian people have chosen hope over fear, solidarity over hate, unquote. But the M25 added, quote again, Lula's victory is one for the poorest, for women, for indigenous peoples, and ultimately for all of us around the world concerned with the protection of Brazil's invaluable ecosystems as part of the crucial fight against climate change. The campaign went on to note that by Brazil's presidential contest, which proceeded to a runoff after neither candidate won the 50% plus needed to secure outright victory earlier this month, quote, was marked by political violence and by Bolsonaro's suggestions that he would not respect the election's results if he lost, unquote. There's going to be trouble, by the way, at this election here in a few days, because we're expecting that a lot of candidates there are not going to respect the election results if they lose. Quote, the M25 and its political parties, MERA, MIRA25 in Greece and in Germany, urge all progressives in Europe to unequivocally denounce any attempt by Bolsonaro to subvert what is widely recognized as one of the most efficient and trustworthy electoral processes in the world, the movement added. The M25's message was echoed by progressives across the globe, including in the United States, where Senator Bernie Sanders, independent of Vermont, and other lawmakers had warned that Bolsonaro's assault on Brazil's voting system and baseless claims of fraud could culminate in violence similar to the January 6, 2021 assault on the U.S. Capitol. Quote, today the people of Brazil have voted for democracy, workers' rights, and environmental sanity, said Sanders, who helped secure Senate passage of a resolution calling on the U.S. government to oppose any subversion of Brazil's democratic process. Quote, I congratulate Lula on his hard-fought victory and look forward to a strong and prosperous relationship between the United States and Brazil, unquote, Sanders added. UK Labour MP Jeremy Corbyn wrote on Twitter that Lula's win represents, quote, a victory for social justice, indigenous rights, and the future of humanity, unquote. The publication in the jubilation in the streets of Brazil, applause from global progressives, and congratulations from leaders in Latin America and around the world contrasted sharply with the silence from Jair Bolsonaro in the wake of his narrow loss. The incumbent defeated after one term in office that brought massive destruction to the Amazon rainforest and a catastrophic pandemic response, declined to speak Sunday night and has not publicly accepted the outcome amidst concerns that he could falsely claim Lula's late surge is evidence of a fraud. As the Associated Press reported, Bolsonaro had been leading through the first half of the count. As soon as Da Silva overtook him, cars in the streets of downtown Sao Paulo began honking their horns. People in the streets of Rio de Janeiro's Ipanema neighborhood could be heard shouting, it turned, quote unquote. Soon after the final result came in, Brazil's presidential palace went dark, with Bolsonaro holed up and refusing to address the media or his supporters. Ultimately, Lula, a former metal worker and union leader who previously served as Brazil's president from 2003 to 2011, won roughly 2 million more votes than Bolsonaro and is set to take office on January 1st. So far, Bolsonaro has not called me to recognize my victory, and I don't know if he will call or if he will recognize my victory, unquote, said Lula to supporters late Sunday. The president-elect, who has vowed to prioritize the fight against hunger and poverty, added that, quote, today the only winner is the Brazilian people, unquote. Quote, this isn't a victory of mine or the Workers' Party, nor the parties that supported me in campaign, unquote. Lula said, it's the victory of a democratic movement that formed above political parties, personal interests, and ideologies, so that democracy came out but victorious. So let's talk for a minute about the significance of the victory if it sticks. In other words, if there's no opposition from the Bolsonaro forces, or if the opposition, is overcome. Then we have the largest country in South America, I believe a bit larger than the United States, in area, with a population of 210 million, which is two-thirds of that of the United States, with immense industrial potential, raw materials galore, of course, the Amazon rainforest and all that it promises if it survives, uh, and with a vigorous democracy movement, um, it never would have been possible for Bolsonaro to become the president if Lula had not been arrested and prevented from running in 2018. That was really a rigged conviction and a rigged election, because they even changed the rules about whether somebody convicted of a crime could run or not in order to stop Lula from running in 2018. And it all came fairly late. So Lula's successor from the Labor Party did not have enough time to mount a successful counter campaign, to get elected himself. So it was really a dirty deal in 2018. Then it took a long time to get Lula out of jail. And by the way, getting him out of jail was facilitated actually by the reportage of Glenn Greenwald, who lives in Brazil, but with his partner, and dedicated himself to trying to find the facts needed to overturn the imprisonment, of Lula. And Glenn was in danger throughout this whole time, but he was successful, and The Intercept here was successful in publishing the facts of the matter, so Lula could be freed. But more on the significance of the victory. It is so important. Country after country that turned to the left and created the rebound or the pink tide, in Latin America, but turned again, but to leftist politics. More countries than the first of the pink tides. But the most significant country in South America was missing, and that was Brazil. And now Brazil has joined the new pink tide. Colombia recently joined the new pink tide also. And Colombia is something like the third largest country in South America. So between Brazil, Colombia, and the other states that had become a part of the pink tide, Argentina, is a point of the pink tide, we now have, with a few exceptions, a series of leftist governments from Mexico all the way down to Argentina, and to Chile. And so that has changed the politics, of Latin America, and will change the politics of the Organization of American States. And if those countries stick together, then I think the policy of the United States towards Latin America is going to have to change. There will just be too much opposition to continued domination of Latin America by the United States. So this is immensely significant as a victory, not only from the Brazilian standpoint, but from the internationalist standpoint, okay, as well. This victory is something whose importance cannot be emphasized too greatly. So I didn't want to say that. Now I want to turn to something else that's very, very significant for all of us, and that is uh, that Lula's win is a victory for the Amazon rainforest and for the global climate. And I'm going to share here, I'm going to share a piece by Juan Cole that says that Juan is a great writer. Steve Day is offering me cream and sugar. And he has kept his eye for years on what's been happening to the Amazon. So this is certainly a great day for the Amazon. And I'll go through Juan's report on that, Juan Cole's report on that. Right now, let me see what I have. Yeah. Okay, it's now on your screen. So Lula's win is a victory for the Amazon rainforest and the global climate. And there is another celebratory picture with Lula surrounded by supporters. And there is Juan Cole, who wrote this today, October 31st, at his blog called Informed Comment. This was picked up by Common Dreams. Luis Inácio Lula da Silva was elected on Sunday to his second non-consecutive term as president in a victory for the planet Earth as well as for Brazil. He first served from 2003 to 2010. Since 2019, Brazil's president has been the far-right demagogue Jair Bolsonaro, who just lost to the leftist Da Silva, who's affectionately known by his nickname Lula. The reason I say that Da Silva's victory is a win for the planet is that the fate of the Amazon rainforest hangs in the balance. But Bolsonaro was determined to destroy it by turning it into big agricultural estates, mines, and other endeavors of barracuda capitalism. The Amazon and other rainforests are major carbon sinks, sucking carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. But rainforests can be flipped by deforestation and wildfires so that they end up emitting more carbon than they absorb, with its extent reduced by 20% in the past 50 years. The Amazon is teetering on that precipice, and some environmentalists fear it may have fallen off the edge already. Certainly, a few more years of Bolsonaro's depredations would spell doom for the rainforest and would exacerbate the climate crisis. The issue is wrought up not only with planetary ecology, but with a vicious class and ethnic struggle inside Brazil. The people who live with the Amazon and make use of its resources without destroying them are largely indigenous Brazilians. There are about 1 million of them, comprising 305 tribes. Survival International explains, quote, the government has recognized 690 territories for its indigenous population, covering about 13% of Brazil's landmass. Nearly all of this reserved land, 98.5%, lies in the Amazon. Bolsonaro, a notorious racist, lamented that land had been reserved for the Indios, quote unquote, as they are called in Portuguese. He saw the latter as uncivilized barbarians who had unfairly blocked the mining of tin, gold, and other minerals in the river basin, and who stood in the way of the expansion of the estates of militant Brazilian ranchers. He promised, quote, in 2019, we're going to rip up Raposa Serra do Sol, indigenous territory in the Roraima, northern Brazil. We're going to give all the ranchers guns, unquote. So Bolsonaro's racism, combined with his capitalist rapaciousness and his desire for political backing from ranchers and mining concerns to make exploiting the Amazon a top priority. Just in the first 2 months of this year, space photography showed that 166 square miles of the rainforest was cleared. In the previous decade, the average amount of land cleared in any 2-month period was less than half that. The policies of Bolsonaro were accelerating the clearing. Contrast, Lula wrote an op-ed for the French newspaper Le Monde this weekend, in which he said, quote, today, the urgency of climate, but mounting inequalities and geopolitical tensions reveal the gravity of the crisis that affects our planet. Unfortunately, Jair Bolsonaro continues to aggravate this situation in embracing climate change denialism and attacking the institutions of our democracy and in promoting intolerance. These characteristics of his government have made Brazil a new pariah on the international scene. This cannot go on. And Reuters Brazil reports in Portuguese that Celso Amorim, the principal foreign policy advisor to Lula, told the Wire service, if elected, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva should propose the holding of a summit of nations of the Amazon rainforest in the first half of 2023, to which developed countries interested in its conservation would also be invited. Reuters concluded from Amorim's remarks that the global repositioning of Brazil on the issue of the environment and the climate crisis will be a priority of the foreign affairs agenda in a possible new government in a context in which deforestation of the Amazon is at the highest level in 15 years. Since the Amazon is a regional, hemispheric, and global issue, the international community needs to support the efforts of Lula. There needs to be substantial reforestation and attention to repairing its health and to protecting it from the wildfires also caused by global heating that have piled on human clearing efforts to reduce its extent. So that is one Cole's article on the subject, a very welcome article in this context, also underscoring the importance of Lula's win. It is, of course, enormously important. Does anybody know if there's any late-breaking stuff related to what Bolsonaro is going to do now? Okay. I asked that question because uh, it is possible Bolsonaro is going to resist the views of the people with all the force um, at his disposal. So 6 hours ago, France 24 said that Brazil holds its breath over Bolsonaro's reaction as Lula claims razor thin win. Well, it's 2 points. That's not really razor thin. But Bolsonaro is still yet to concede. That was as of but 3 hours ago. And as of 2 hours ago, The Guardian said that Bolsonaro remained silent after election defeat to Lula, as some of Bolsonaro's key allies accept the result of the election. Let's see what that says right at this point. Bolsonaro did get 58.2 million votes, and Lula somewhere over 60 million. A stream of world leaders have stepped forward to recognize the stunning comeback of Lula, including Joe Biden, the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, the Russian leader Vladimir Putin, and China's Communist Party chief Xi Jinping. Sorry. But Bolsonaro, a pro-dictatorship radical who has repeatedly hinted he might not accept a defeat, has yet to concede. With 100% of votes counted, Lula was at 50.9% to Bolsonaro's 49.10%, and Lula received 60.3 million votes, while the right-wing incumbent had 58.2 million votes. While Bolsonaro remained silent, key allies did accept the result and a sign that the populist power was rapidly ebbing after 4 tumultuous years in office. Silas Malafia, a prominent televangelist who is one of Bolsonaro's most vocal cheerleaders, tweeted, quote, "The sovereign will of the people has established itself." He tweeted a quote from the British writer C.S. Lewis as his candidate's defeat sank in, quote, "It's not your business to succeed, but to do right. When you have done so, the rest lies with God," unquote. The newly elected pro-Bolsonaro governor of Sao Paulo, Tarcísio de Freitas, also recognized Lula's win, saying to journalists, "The election result is sovereign." Another key ally, the lower house leader, Arthur Lira, said, "The will of the majority expressed at the polls should never be challenged." Even Sergio Moro, the pro-Bolsonaro judge who controversially jailed Lula in the lead up to the 2018 election, before taking a job in Bolsonaro's cabinet, recognized the leftist victory. This is democracy, Moro tweeted. And Richard Salas, former environment minister, tweeted, the result of the most polarized election in Brazil's history prompts many reflections and the need to seek ways to pacify a country that is literally split in half. Now is the time for serenity, unquote. However, Bolsonaro and his three politician sons remained tight-lipped on Monday morning. The news website UOL said he was holed up in the presidential residence in Brasilia. By Monday lunchtime, the only hint that he might be prepared to accept defeat was a tweet from one of his closest allies, the evangelical preacher Damaris Alves, in which she wrote, "We lost an election, but we haven't lost our love for our country. But Bolsonaro will leave the presidency in January with his head held high." Some observers have voiced concern Bolsonaro may follow in the footsteps of his U.S. ally Donald Trump and refuse to accept defeat in an attempt to keep his political movement alive. The political commentator Bernardo Melofranco tweeted, "One by one, Bolsonaristas recognize Lula's victory. This leaves the president without the political support to attempt any kind of coup-style adventure." So hopefully the Guardian is right about that. I do have to say that with the country so split, Brazil so split, as with the United States as split as it is right now, the Bolsonaro movement in Brazil and the Trumpist movement here in the United States are likely to be part of our political landscape for some time to come. They are movements now with an infrastructure. They are movements with a lot of money behind them. When these movements get active inside of a democracy and get established in a democracy, it takes years for them to be vanquished. Even when they're defeated in elections, they remain a part of the political scene and a part of the infrastructure. In the next election for the presidency, probably a Bolsonarista candidate will be back. I think that given what Lula will attempt to do, he may be more effective in dampening down that movement than we are here in America, because he will be careful to do a lot for the people, of that country, which will remove a part of the political base that the Bolsonaristas enjoy today. So that's my last word for today on this. I'll be having another show at 9 p.m. tonight. That show has already been scheduled. It's going to be about the Federal Reserve and the mistake the Federal Reserve has made in trying to treat the inflation by raising high interest rates. So we'll be talking about that at 9 p.m. tonight. I hope you'll return, and you will be there. But that is all for me now. Hopefully I will see you then, and thank you very much for coming.